very concept of ownership. My opponents speak of conquest, of seizing land, as if humans possess ultimate dominion, yet their own holy traditions are unequivocal. God is the sole and ultimate owner of all creation. We are not owners, but humble stewards entrusted by God to manage his creation responsibly with love and justice and with consideration for all. This forceful acquisition, not the ultimate act of pride, an arrogant usurpation of God's sovereignty, attempting to steal not merely from fellow humans, but from God himself. And if these general prohibitions are not enough, our faith gives us a chillingly precise parable, the story of Naboth's vineyard in 1 Kings chapter 21, where King Ahab, a mighty ruler, coveted the small plot of land belonging to Naboth. Through deceit and violence, Ahab seized the vineyard. What was the divine response? The prophet Elijah delivered God's judgment, leading to the utter destruction of Ahab's royal line. The church fathers teach us that Ahab's sin was tantamount to Naboth's land moral. If you say it was immoral, then you concede my entire argument. If you dare to say it was moral, then you stand in direct opposition to Holy Scripture and the clear judgment of God. Finally, let us consider the Orthodox Church's consistent stance on war and aggression. It does not possess a just war theory in the Western sense that might somehow rationalize conquest. While defensive war to protect the innocent might be a regrettable necessity in a fallen world, aggressive war for territorial gain is profoundly condemned. Killing, even in self-defense, requires spiritual repentance. How then can an act of aggression carried out for repentance? Indeed, when the church is manipulated to justify state aggression, their own hierarchs have called it a profound betrayal of Orthodox tradition and even apostasy. Now, my opponent's position is not rooted in Orthodox Christianity. It is a secular, cynical ideology, explicit commandments, and the consistent mind of the church. It is, in essence, a profound betrayal of the gospel itself. To take land by force is immoral, it is unjust, it is illegal, and for an Orthodox Christian, it is a spiritual rebellion against God. Thank you.
Sorry.
You gotta unmute,
There we
Chuck.
go. Sorry. Hi, I'm Enemy Charlie. I stream primarily on Twitch. My specialty is fantasy literature, not politics or philosophy, but I comment anyway. And thank you for having me. So, before I dive into the meat of my argument, I would like to quickly address and clarify my frame of reference on land rights and morality. Because we'll be discussing colonization, it's important to clarify that land ownership is not a universal concept. The indigenous peoples of the Americas did not have the same legal structures as European settlers. Borders as they exist today are a modern construct, so when we talk about who has the right to specific tracts of land, by Article 26 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples have the rights to land and territory which they have traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used or acquired. If you live there and work the land and there is no one in living memory that needs to live there and you supposedly have the right to the land, a lack of legal ownership under a European legal structure is not a valid reason for the seizure of indigenous lands. And now on to morality. While I believe that morality is subjective, human beings across most cultures and time periods generally agree that murder and theft are wrong in most contexts. This is across Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, etc. Humans are social creatures and we need each other. Murdering and stealing from each other are not conducive to building a lasting, thriving society. I will reference the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Operating under the force doctrine inevitably leads to being subject to it yourself. In the Rupture, Francophone scholar Frank Stanton wrote, "The exploded man sees that his liberation implies the use of all means and that of force first and foremost." When in 1956, after the first relations to the settlers in Algeria, the Front de Liberation Nationale, in a famous leaflet, stated that colonialism the knife was at its throat. No Algerian really found these terms too violent. The leaflet only expressed what every Algerian felt at heart. Colonialism is not a thinking machine, nor a body endowed with reasoning. It is violence that is natural state, and will only yield when confronted with greater violence. The Algerian Liberation War ended in 1962 with approximately 500,000 Algerians and 30,000 French dead. And here I will concede, though violent decolonization efforts are rarely successful through sheer force alone, the price of paid in human lives and resources is too costly for any nation to pay for long. The more violent a regime, the faster it falls. Many European nations have already their claims to foreign lands for this very reason.
Thank you, Charlie, and Marte to you.
So my opponent and Charlie had brought up the golden rule, which assumes that everybody
wants to be treated the same at the end of the day, which is a crazy notion, actually, if you really think about this. So I'm going to go into my little short thing. I'll be quick. So the situation with land conquest is thought of as morality on an international scale. So who gets to enforce morality at an international level? It's usually a country or a coalition of countries with bigger sticks. So while my other opponent, Christopher Colt, can say might makes right, we've never asserted that. Only might only makes. So what you can do is, if you feel that one of these big countries is morally slighting the people, this really sucks, but this is simply the reality of the world. Justice does not exist. There is no effective way to enforce it. We can point fingers all day that we want and say that there's something morally wrong, but at the end of the day, there's little else or nothing to do about
And
it.
Andrew, to you, please.
Well, thank you. I also would like to thank my opponents for the brutal slaughter, which is about to happen this evening. I do. To you. I even combed my hair this evening because I wanted to show respect. Didn't wear my black shirt. I'd like to point out, firstly, that this debate is absurd on its face. While I'll grant there can be cases where using force to remove people from their land by force can be immoral, in and of itself, using force to occupy or take land cannot be immoral. My opponents can't possibly believe this either, or they will need to explain things like taxes, specifically property tax, which is an assessed and forced payment of an asset to an entity on a thing you own, which if you don't pay your property taxes, your property becomes a default. And it's taken by force, Christopher Colt. It's taken by force if you default.
Taken by force.
Or let's take a look at the American Revolution, in which we annexed by violence a rather large amount of land, which was owned by the Crown of England. In fact, my examples of force doctrine being used to occupy are past. My opponents would probably agree with every single one of them. So what are we really even talking about here? Imagine trying to navigate the redresses, which would be necessary here if we actually took our opponents at face value. It's mind-boggling how much land has changed hands in a very short historic period of time, let alone long historic periods of time. If we attempted to redress it all, it would be not only a monumental task, but it could actually lead to some pretty absurd and hilarious outcomes. Like, let's take the Native American example. Say we have Tribe A and Tribe B. Tribe A has a document from the government of promised land, which the government then stole from them. Then Tribe A pursues redress for this and is awarded for occupied land in its full amount. Then Tribe B sues now Tribe Land A and gets awarded even more money because Tribe A stole all that land from Tribe B 500 years before that land was stolen from Tribe A by the United States government. Do I think that that would be hilarious? Yes. Do I think that that actually would be what would have to happen if my opponents were consistent in their logic after I show them the hundreds of examples of natives stealing land from each other? Yes. Imagine if we did this, by the way, for every perceived injustice of land changing hands. It's absurd and also hilarious. In short, I'm not even really sure what my opponent's position is here. But in asking, is it immoral to take land by force, the answer is, well, sometimes. Sometimes it is. And sometimes it isn't. Right? But we wouldn't be appealing to the idea that just doing that in and of itself was always immoral, because that would be preposterous. It would monolithically put up a thing which you guys don't even believe. How do I know you don't believe it? Well, because Chuck over here already told us. She conceded that force doctrine was moral, using Nigeria as an example of revolution, which is also hilarious. Force doctrine, so that you understand what it actually is.
Algeria.
Yeah, whatever. Whatever it was. Okay, the point is, and by the way, I didn't interrupt you once, Chuck. That wasn't very nice, Chuck. But anyway, the idea here is of what force doctrine is pretty simple. Force doctrine is just saying that all rights come from men. Not making a might makes right argument. Rather, force doctrine is giving you a descriptor for how the world works. Now, you can argue with force doctrine if you want to with that descriptor, but you'd have to replace it with a more accurate descriptor, and nobody to date has been able to do so because it's an accurate descriptor. Otherwise, I would not have come up with it. You say, do unto others as you would have done unto you. Well, here's the thing that's interesting about that. By whose metric? The secularist metric or by the Christian metric? Which metric should we use and utilize, since that's part of Christian ethics and not a secular ethic? Why should we adhere to your version of what that means? You say morality is subjective, and then at the same time you say that there's some type of universal here which you're appealing to, right? All morality is subjective, but universally it's always wrong to take land. That's a contradiction in and of itself. That's A and not A. When you say land ownership is not universal, well, I agree. I agree that this is a social construction. So we have to start with what ownership actually is. I would make the claim that ownership is, one, a declaration that a thing belongs to you, and then that would have to be backed by some kind of force for you to keep said thing. For instance, let's say for a second you were walking through a desert and you were thirsty, and you came across a dead body with a full canteen. If you took that canteen and drank from it, would you be stealing? Or would you have a deference of ownership where you would feel like this was a justified transfer of property because the person who was there no longer needed the canteen? And then if somebody tried to take the canteen from you, would you say, no, it's mine? I think you would, right? So I think just by the establishment of what we would consider ownership to be, I think you're going to end up having to concede to our position doctrine. I think that you're probably a pretty pro-taxes guy, if you're a Democrat anyway. And I would love to know how that's not theft by the same metric that you gave us for war is condemned. No, it's not. No. We have saints who conducted an aggressive war like Saint Helga, who literally unleashed pigeons that were on fire to burn down an entire city and killed everybody inside it. She's a saint. You have no idea what you're talking about, because Christianity and Christian ethics are pluralistic, right? You cannot make the universals. They're going to be case-by-case specific for a reason. You say, and I'll just end with this. When you're talking about Native Americans, I wouldn't want to say Indians and offend anybody's delicate sensibilities. What you're alluding to is the myth of the noble savage. I'm going to tell you the truth about what was really going on with Native Americans. They were sacrificing each other on top of temples, cutting each other's hearts out. They were raping children. They were killing and murdering each other en masse all the time, nonstop. And if you came across a culture like that,